This video will be the first in a series of videos that shows how to use HTML along with JavaScript and Node and Express to create a website that interacts with a SQLite database, and it will allow you to create forms to go and add data to the database and retrieve data and edit data, search for data, and do all the CRUD operations within a database. CRUD, C-R-U-D, stands for create, read, update, and delete. Creating records, reading records, updating records, and deleting records. So in order to first do this, we have to go and create a folder out there where we can use our node and act as our server. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm using Visual Studio Code, and I'll go to the terminal window and do new terminal. And in this terminal window I can create a folder somewhere. And so I'll just do a make dir, which stands for make a directory, and I'll call this whole project, because it's going to be our whole project that we're going to work on. You can call it whatever you want, it's not going to matter. And it came back and said, yeah, you created a project, you created a directory, it's out there, and here's the information about that directory. And now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and move into that directory, or change directories. mkdir stands for make directory, cd stands for change directory. So cd space whole project, and this now puts me down inside of that directory. And so you can see we're now inside that directory. And now that we're inside that directory, I want to type in npm. That stands for the Node Package Manager. Now you should have already watched the videos that shows you how to download and install Node Express onto your computer. So if you have not, please back out of this video and go do that one in my YouTube area, my YouTube channel. So npm stands for Node Package Manager, and that's going to allow us to incorporate or download other modules for our program to use. But in order for us to set up a node directory, we can also use npm to say npm space init, I-N-I-T. And what this will do for us is this will go through and create a configuration file that our Node Express application is going to use. And the first thing it asks is, what do you want to call the package name? We're going to go ahead and leave that as whole project, so just press enter. By the way, notice if you ever want to get out of here, you press Control-C to quit. Version 1.0, sounds great, it's a brand new version, let's leave it. Description, this is my first Node Express app. Press enter. Entry point, this says when you run this program, what's the file that's going to be executed, or what is the main program for this website. And actually we're going to use one on our server. This is the server file. It's called index.js, JS for JavaScript. You can call this anything you want. Index is standard because we're just used to index, meaning this is where we start for web development. I could call it server.js, pancakes.js, spam.js, doesn't matter. But this is telling us which file on our server is the entry point for our application. We're going to go ahead and leave it as index.js, press enter. Don't worry about test command right now, but this allows us to tell our system through our package what tool we want to use if we ever want to do testing. And so this would be maybe something like Karma or Jest, some type of tool that we use for testing of scripting. We're going to go ahead and leave that empty for now. Git repository, this allows us to specify where our data is going to be stored in Git. And we're not going to do that in this video, but Git allows you to work as a team and share code with other people. So just leave that empty. Keywords. This is where you would type in any words that would help other people discover your package. If they ever did what they call an NPM search, then it could come out and use these keywords to find your package so that other people could use it. We're going to go ahead and leave it empty though. Author, put your name. Actually, don't type in the word your name, put your name there. Press enter. License. This is actually if you wanted to specify a license for our package, and we're not going to worry about typing in any license information, but ISC stands for Internet Systems Consortium, and there's other licenses out there like BSD or MIT, and what they allow us to do is they just specify if we have a license based upon this package. We're specifying that it is licensed by a certain organization. In our case, it's absolutely not, because it's not going to really be anything wonderful special, but maybe in some organization that you work out there, maybe you need this product licensed, so you could look more into that. Last thing is it says here's what the package is going to look like. Does this look okay? You don't have to type yes, just press enter. And if I typed in dir, which stands for directory, it would say you now have a file called package.json. I could look at that file by typing more, package.json, and it would say here's the contents of that file. That's what the more command does. Also be aware that in this terminal window you can press the up arrow and that will go through a bunch of different history of commands that you've already typed in. So now that we've got our package.json created, this says we're ready to actually start working with our Node Express. One thing I want you to try though first is just type in the word node and press enter. Notice you have a greater than sign right here. You've now entered into what we call the REPL, R-E-P-L, and it stands for Read, Evaluate, Print, Loop. And this is Node's way of allowing you to have a command line environment. It's like a shell for the Node language where we could type things in. We can type in expressions and Node will evaluate them. So we could do simple things just to try this out. We could say, okay, let's see how this REPL works. And so let's type in an expression. Let's type in 5 times 2, enter, and it says 10. Let's type in hello plus space plus world, spelled correctly, enter, and it says hello world. Could I type in var inum equals 10 semicolon, undefined, but if I typed in inum, it says 10. So this is acting a lot like your console when you inspect in your browsers. When you use like the Chrome inspector, you can go to console and type in a bunch of different things. Could you type in the word console.log inum, enter, and it displays 10. So this REPL, the REPL, that just is a Node command line environment where we can type in statements, and it stands for read, eval, print, and loop. The read portion, the R portion, says that we can accept expressions from the user. So we're reading what they're typing in. The eval says we take what they typed in and we can run that or execute it. The print says we can now display it to the user, and the loop says we can just keep doing this. If we ever want to get out of this REPL, you can type in exit, and it says does not, it's not defined. Oh, well, it must be the word quit then. Quit is not defined. So the way we get out of this is you press Control C and then press Control C again. So you have to do it 2 times. Or instead of typing the word exit or quit, I could have typed period exit, period exit. And that would take me out of the REPL. If you want to get out of the terminal window, you can either type in exit here or Control-C it, or just click this little garbage can, which is what I usually do, and that kills the terminal window that you've been working with. So we now have our package JSON. Let's go ahead and add that folder to Visual Studio Code. If you don't see the add folder show up, what you can do is click on File, Add Folder to Workspace, and then go find that folder that you were working with. In my case, it was my C drive, and it was my users, and it was my Prof Greg, and then I created a folder called Whole Project. So add that folder that you just created to Visual Studio Code, and lo and behold, there's your package.json file. And that is the file that specifies what's going to happen when we're working with our server. So now that we've said that this folder is going to be a node folder, and we have our package JSON created through our npm space init, we've said that our main entry point for this website is going to be a file called index.js. We need to go ahead and create a brand new file, and we'll do a file save as, and we're going to call it index.js. So this will be our new file that we're going to work with. By the way, on our package.json, that JSON, that stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So just be aware, if you ever hear JSON, they're just talking about JavaScript and how we work with objects inside of that package. This is saying we're working with an object. The attribute name has a value of whole project. The attribute version has a value of that. Description has a value of, and so it's a name value or a key value working with objects. Now take a look at this one, scripts. Scripts is an attribute, but look at its value. Its value is another object. So scripts has a test object, and within this other object, its attribute test has a value of that string. So JSON just stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it's just storing that information as an object through the curly braces with an attribute, colon, and a value. So let's go back to our index.js. This is the file we said that when we run our application, we want it to execute on the server. Let's just type in console.log, double quote or single quote, this is fun, semicolon. And let's go ahead and save that. Control S or file save. Now what we want to do is let's go out to our terminal window. In order to run a Node Express application, you have to run Node as your server. So type in the word Node, and remember that took us to our REPL, right? But in this case, we're going to say Node space, and we're going to specify the name of the file that we want to run on the server. So we're going to say index.js. So we're saying execute through Node index.js. And it says this is fun, and it stops. Well, that really didn't do a whole lot, did it? Actually, it did. This is a file, index.js is a file that lives on the server. We're now saying run a file on the server called index.js. We can now go write and modify our index.js file to do a whole bunch of stuff with our website. And so this allows us to start a file on the server, and we're going to tell it in just a minute we want it to start listening. Now, since we're doing a Node Express application, we want to use Express. In order to use Express, you need to bring that into your application. So what you need to do is in your terminal window, type in npm for Node Package Manager, install, which allows us to go and install other modules that have already been written and bring those libraries into our application. And we want to install the Express module. And go ahead and press enter. This will now go out and find the Express modules and download them to your folder and install them for this directory. We now have a directory, or we now have packages, node packages for our application. Take a look at the structure here. First of all, it says here's the node modules that you're bringing in. And it made a new folder inside of our folder with a whole bunch of different subfolders. Here's an Express subfolder. And we have the library to Express that we can now use. In fact, I can even look at that information. Let me kill this terminal window. I'm now looking at the express.js. And you have access to some of the information that Express is using. And it's actually bringing in different libraries. One of them is called Body Parser, which is very popular. And so we can see that Express library module has been brought into our application because we now installed it. Another thing you need to realize is that a new file has been created called package-lock.json. And what this file is doing for us is it's describing the tree of how things were generated within our package. It has our project name, the version, and then it starts saying these are the things that have been brought into your project, all because we did our npm init and also because we installed Express. And so it's almost like, I guess you could say, a history or a pathway of what our project is going to be using. Hopefully, for the most part, we don't really have to modify this. So for now, we're just going to ignore that file, but don't do anything with it. So now let's go back to Express. Now that we said we want to have Node Express, and we currently were just saying let's do some display a message, and that's it. We want our application to do something. We want our application on the server. Remember, this is the file stored on your server. Your web pages are brought down to your browser. That's the client side. Your laptop or desktop is your browser, and that's the client side. The server is where your web pages and everything are hosted. Your client makes an HTTP request to the server. The server then says, I will serve up or give you the files that you're requesting if I want you to have those files. So this index.js file lives on the server, and its whole job is going to be to manage the traffic of your web page. It's going to sit out there and direct traffic when people make requests to it. If they type in www.yourpage.com, it finds the server and says, hey, we need to see your main page. The server then says, oh, what do you want? The main page? Great, I've been listening. Here's my main page. And it sends it back to the client. So let's write the server file. The first thing we have to do is we have to create a variable. And we can do let or constant. I'll go ahead and do let for now. And I'll create a variable. I'm going to call it Express. And I'm going to say the word require Express. So what we're doing is we're saying we need to use Express in our server program that we're making. Express is a popular Node web framework. And what it does is it's a library that a lot of Node frameworks, other frameworks, will use. It actually will simplify our ability to use HTTP requests and URL paths, which we call routes, and it allows us to integrate views and rendering of those views, the drawing of those views. And it's the way that we're going to make development easier working with Node. This first statement says we're going to create a variable called Express, and we're going to go and require or import the Express module. In other words, we're giving our program access to that library. We're bringing it in so we can start to work with it. And if you notice when I put my cursor on there, you could see the path of what we're trying to work with. And so we're saying bring this Express library into our application. Well, now that we have the Express library there, we need to go create a variable. I called mine app. You can call it anything you want. App Express. And then this is actually going and making an object of type Express. And it stores it to the app variable. So we're making an Express application object and storing it to app. So this now gives us access to Express within our program. The next thing we want to do is we want to take our Express application object and we want to say we need you to listen. So this is our server program. It's going to sit out there on the internet and it's just going to listen for anyone that's trying to hit our website. That's what we do on the server. We just listen. So it's got an ear up to the internet framework, the internet, and it's just saying, hey, is anybody talking to me? Does anyone want to talk to me? And finally somebody does, and so then it can actually do something. You have to specify a port, a computer port, for the communication to happen. So in this case, a port is just a programmatic docking point through which information is going to flow from a computer program to the internet. So it's like a little phone jack. It's a programmatic area, and that communication is going to happen back and forth. And there's different ports associated with different things on a computer. And we're not going to go into all of those, but if you'd ever like to go see a list of all the ports, I just put a comment in there. You can go to this web page. It's a wiki page. But that lists a variety of ports that are commonly used ports that we have out there. And ranges of ports usually do different things, whether it's FTP or TCP, and they're just they are specifically identified to do something. In our case, we're going to use port 3000. Now, if you've ever run Visual Studio Code and done a go live, you'll notice when you say go live, you'll see a port number show up down here, and it's port 5500. So you might want to watch for that, and the next time you do a go live and just see what that means. 5500 can be used for a variety of things. That wiki page says that 5500 is used for hotline control connection and VNC remote frame buffer for incoming listening of a viewer. But that's just what the go live is specified to look at. So in our case, we're just going to specify 3000 for right now. Other ports that are popular, or one that you might have heard of, is 8080, 8080. And that's an alternative port for HTTP, which also uses port 80 and 8008. And those are specific ports for doing HTTP. So let's go ahead and continue on, because we're going to say we're going to use port 3000. And I'll go ahead and get rid of this comment I just put in there. We're going to say port 3000, and then we need to tell it what to do. So we're going to write a JavaScript function, but this is different. You just say the word function, curly brace, and then you can say whatever you want to do. And we're going to say, we're just going to post a message to the console log that says, we'll be consistent and use double quotes, I am now listening. So when we run this file on the server, we should see a message up that says it's listening. Let's go ahead and save that file. And let's go to terminal, new terminal. Now remember, the way you run an Express Node application is you come into terminal and you have to start node. So you say the word node, space, and then the name of the server file you want to run. We want to run index.js. So when I run that, it now says I am listening. This file on the server is running and it's waiting to communicate with anyone that tries to go to the web page. Now I don't have any web pages yet, but it is listening. Last time we ran this, it just ran something, displayed it, and stopped. This one is still running. So press Control C and you can stop that file from running. Go ahead and click the garbage can and you can close the terminal window. So now let's do something else. Let's say that we want something to happen if they ever come to our web page. So we're going to create a route. A route is actually a road or a pathway on how you navigate your website. And in your route, you can either have a get or a post. Does that sound familiar from a previous video that you've seen? When you work with HTML forms, you specify methods for that action. And the method can either be a get or a post. And our get method specifies what we call a callback. And what a callback does is it can actually take a request and a response and then do something. And so we're going to say HTTP GET. If you ever go to the root directory, so if they ever try to go to our root directory of our program, we want it to go to a function that receives two parameters. The first parameter is the HTTP request from the user. The second is the response that we are going to generate and send back to the user. And what we want to do is we want to say in our response from the server back to the client, we want to send the message, hello world. Don't forget to put a semicolon at the end of that function also. And so we're just saying if they ever go to the root directory of our application, go receive the request from the URL, generate a response, and in our response send the message hello world. Let's go ahead and save that. Let's go back to our terminal window. Let's run our server node index.js. It's now out there and it says I am listening. And so if I now come back over to the browser and I type in localhost 3000 because that's our port, that's going to say go to the root directory and execute in your node application whatever the root directory get route says to do. And it says hello world. Once again, just to explain this part, if you were trying to go to www.ksl.com, that would say go to the root folder or the index folder if there is one and execute whatever file is the default file. By us saying go to localhost 3000, that's almost as if we typed in www.whatever.com, which would go to the root folder. And that's why back over here this says if you ever try to go to the root folder, receive the request, generate the response, and in the response send the message hello world. Now let's see what would happen if we came back over to here, and we'll just go back to our new tab there, and I want to do the following. I want to go ahead and say console.log req, and let's save that. And notice our server is still listening here. Let's come back over to here, go back to the local host, come back here, and I don't see anything in my console log yet though, right? So let's see what would happen if I stop the server, terminal, new terminal, start the server again, come back over to here, refresh that local host, and now here's the request object we just received. Let me scroll all the way up until you see where it says I am listening. Right here, I am now listening. Here's the incoming request from the browser. Looks like it's a big object and it has some attributes, and those attribute values might be other objects too. And so here's the request that we're receiving when somebody tried to go to our home page. And you can just go through and look at all that information. That's quite a bit of information, isn't it? The HTTP parser, the message, all that information that gets generated in the HTTP request gets sent into this object, the REQ object. And that comes whenever somebody tries to go to our website. There's a request that gets generated. And then the server's job is to generate the response. So let's try one more thing. Now that we did the console on the request, let's just do console on the response and see if that looks any different. We'll come back to here. We'll start our node. Let's go back to your browser. We'll just do a refresh. Alt-tab back. And this is the response that we're generating. The server response. This is the response we're sending back to the client, whoever tried to talk to us. So here's all the information we're sending back. But in our case, we said take that response object we just generated, call the send method, and send it the message hello world. Go ahead and close that. In our next video, we're going to see how we can actually maybe work with an HTML file and send back the HTML rather than just a message. That'll be part 2 of putting it all together.